Jane Slater, NFL Network reporter, works for NFL Game Day Morning, and you'll see that Saturday at noon Eastern, Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and then they spend hours and hours up until game time. And she was at the Mike McCarthy press conference yesterday, and Jane joins us on the program. Help me understand Mike McCarthy's demeanor yesterday. If it was defiant or confident, or is there another word that you would use to describe him?
I think he used the words that I would describe. I think he said that he was raw and a little numb to it all, talking about the playoff loss and how it went. And he talked about how hard and challenging, questions about his job security have been for his family. And so I still think even after 4 years, there has been an adjustment for Mike from what he was used to in Green Bay and what comes with, players that have been around here longer than him know it, the star on the helmet. And so I think it was almost like he was still processing everything in real time up on the podium. And I know a lot has been made of the question that I had to Mike, and it was, I phrased it a lot more sensitive than how it's been put out there. But, I said to him, respectfully, Coach, you've told us why we should buy back in this team, but why should fans buy back into you? And, he talked about the direction, the leadership, everything's in place, and he's not very comfortable talking about himself. But he came to Dallas to win a world championship, not to get a contract after his year, away from Green Bay, but to win that world championship. And then he just ended it with buy-in. And I think a lot of fans took issue with that. They almost, I think, wanted to hear something like we might hear from Dan Campbell these days. They want to see the emotional. Like, I think about you guys every day, and let's go bite the kneecaps or burn a bird for the NFC East. It's just we didn't get that, and so having covered Mike the last couple of years, I didn't expect a rah speech, but I also want to give him a little grace here that I do think that this stuff and this job can sometimes weigh on folks.
Do you think Jerry Jones reached out to other possible candidates?
No. And I've made a lot of calls about that. I've talked to people internally. I've talked to people on the outside. I even reached out to Bill Belichick's agent, who doesn't like to get back to most folks, Neil. But everyone I've talked to seems to suggest that a call was never even made to Bill. Not dissimilar from last year when we heard so much about Sean Payton, as you'll remember, Dan. Sean never got a call from Jerry. And so some of this is Jerry Jones. A lot of it, I didn't think it was productive leading up to the playoff game for Mike, who already I was told last year when he went to Lambeau and, faced the Packers for the first time that he was tight, that he was tense about it. And it was almost like he confirmed that this week when he got ahead of it and said, I know the narratives are there. It didn't help us last year to talk about the Packers. They were focused on the game. But, when you've just won a big one, albeit it was against the Commanders, but I would remind everyone, remember they laid an egg on the road against the Commanders last year when it was Sam Howell's first start. They had a big win, and in the locker, outside the locker room post-game, Jerry sort of showing there wasn't a lot of confidence in the sense that it was, you could have said, Mike's my guy. Look at the 12 wins. We're so excited to get into the postseason. There wasn't really that. And then it took him going on the radio on 105 to the fan to sort of maybe put it to bed, as though it was like put it to bed light. And then you still had, people who I really respect in this business, Adam Schefter and Peter King, putting out this narrative that, hey, Bill's out there, and if this thing goes south, they're going to make a phone call. I don't think that helped Mike. And so they talked about it, and Jerry talked about it post game about, needing to take accountability. And I hope that Jerry also sees there's a level of accountability that sometimes he needs to take as, you want people to do good. I don't think it feels really great when your boss isn't coming out and saying, throwing all their support as much as they can behind you. And if you talk to Stephen and Jerry about it, they're not wrong. Everyone's job is always up for evaluation. I think you and I are also in that evaluation business. And so I understand it. I just don't think it helps it.
If I said to the fan base, you can change ownership, change the coach, change the quarterback, how do you think that vote would go?
If you're listening to Dallas radio, or I always consider my father as a great pulse check here in Dallas. I grew up here. He is the typical Dallas Cowboys fan that takes the flag off of the house when they lose and tells you he's done with the team and he's going to return his jersey. And, of course, he never does, you know. So I kind of laugh about it. But, yeah, I mean, I think the fans get frustrated with Jerry because I think that, you know, the pushback every year is you can't fire the GM because Jerry is the GM. But I do think that people don't understand that Jerry he doesn't make a lot of these decisions in a vacuum. I mean, he does really weigh what Will McClay and player personnel have to say. And for that matter, you know, people want to know why is Mike McCarthy coming back. I was really, you know, I reached out to a lot of players. You know, they had an opportunity for off-the-record discussions about Mike McCarthy. I just wanted to heat check, you know, what was the temperature of the locker room. And, Dan, they were so supportive of Mike. They wanted him back. And I think a lot of people just assumed that this team quit on Mike. They did it, and a lot of them took ownership for the way that they played. But I think that the problem for, you know, at least the Cowboys fans right now is, 12 wins are great. And you're getting into the postseason, but these early exits, and more importantly, the way they're losing and the way they don't seem to show up. I mean, the first one here with, you know, Jimmy G, it was in your own building, and then you don't get the ball to the ref in time at the end of the game over. Embarrassing. Last year, you go up to Santa Clara, and once you lose Tony Pollard, all of a sudden this team is one-dimensional, and then your final memory of Ezekiel Elliott is him lining up at center. And then this year, I mean, the fact that here you were driving the ball, you thought you had a chance right before the half, and it's 27-0 after Darnell Savage gets the pick six. And then they finally put up points in the fourth quarter after Jair Alexander comes out of the game. I mean, it doesn't inspire confidence about what this team is capable of. And I think more importantly, one stat that really stands out to me was they're now 2-6, at least from this season, including the post, when the opposing team scores on the first drive. And so it's like they can't, if they don't get on the board early and they don't score early, they have a hard time bouncing back. And even this defense, as much as, you know, I think all of us like Dan Quinn, and I mean, if you talk to anybody in the locker room, man, they'll run through a wall for him. This year they were getting hammered against teams that were good. And so I think everything has to be evaluated, and listening to Mike McCarthy at a 3-hour conversation with Jerry where they went over the course of all of this. And now, you know, we're being told Dak Prescott, you know, coming back. I mean, you really can't move on from him with his almost $60 million cap hit. And Mike says he is part of the solution. Well, what about your 16 other free agents? You know, what does this mean for Micah Parsons? What does this mean for CeeDee Lamb? As Stephen Jones will tell you year after year, there's only so many pieces of the pie. So I think that's where all of this is going to get really, really interesting.
Yeah, I brought this up during the season. I said, you know, no matter how this season ends, you know, Dallas could be in a bad situation because they have really good players. CeeDee Lamb is going to want a big contract. Micah Parsons is going to want a big contract. And Dak's going to have a big number there as well. So I don't know how they get around. Are they going to pay all three? And what's the fallout from that with the rest of the roster?
Well, I'll say this about the Cowboys, they always figure out a way. And a lot of that is, unfortunately, why we're here with Dak Prescott is they will push the money towards the back end. But then you're stuck with, I mean, we saw this with Tony Romo. I mean, they had to eat Tony Romo's money too. Luckily, they had a four-string quarterback in Dak Prescott who just had an incredible rookie season. You felt good moving on, even though you had to eat that. But you were kind of a little bit in cap hell there for a second. And so I think the question is, like, how do they play with this money? And do they give you the money up front and then they push the money down the line? I think those are all questions they've got right now. The big thing that I don't think a lot of people realize that's holding him up with Dak Prescott is he also, Todd France, tip of the cap to him, very shrewd agent for Dak, got him a no trade clause in there and a no franchise tag. So, you know, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with Dak's deal.
Great to talk to you. I know you got a busy morning. Thanks for making time for us, Jane.
Of course, always a pleasure, and I'll always make time for you and the Danettes.
All right, thank you. That's Jane Slater, NFL Network reporter, making time for you guys.